Paige will have a recording of this as well.
Actually, maybe that's just easier then. Is just do what you did before and just send me the video.
Cool, can do. And fair warning, my internet did die out on me about an hour ago, so yeah, kind of a crapshoot for this afternoon.
Alamosa internet.
I know, that's at Pagosa Springs.
I'm sorry, Pagosa Springs. Oh, I don't know.
It's close enough. It's also
bad start here. Bad start. Welcome everyone. As you're tuning in, we'll just give folks a few minutes to hop on here. Hey, Eric, could you enable screen sharing?
All right, should be good to go.
All right, we'll give folks like one more minute here and then get rolling.
Paige, just to confirm, fireflies.ai note taker tech is yours, right?
Yep.
Cool.
I invited the bot.
It's like a vampire. They can't enter without permission.
All right, well, I think we're probably good to start getting rolling here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Good to see folks here. It has been a busy late winter and spring. We did the most ASO flights that we've ever done in a single season in Colorado. And I know the ASO team has been cranking hard to get all those going and data processed and out and to be used operationally. Sounds like someone might be unmuted there. If you could just mute. And yeah, they also did by far the most number of flights they've ever done in a single season in California, which they might speak to as well. So today, the kind of main agenda item is we'll be just doing a season overview of all the flights we did in Colorado this year, and where we can, getting kind of stakeholder input from the basins of those flights on how the data has been used, and any insights it's provided so far, and kind of thoughts about where we can go with the data next year as well, and in the off season. And then Cody Moser from the CBRFC will be giving an overview after that on how they've produced their experimental forecast this year, where they've integrated the ASO data in the certain basins in Colorado and produce these side-by-side experimental forecasts. So again, yeah, thanks for being here. Feel free to chime in at any time with questions or further input, or if you see any insights as you're looking at the data live, we'd love to hear from you, and we can do some Q&A and just general discussion at the end as well. Just a quick reminder here on just the planning team that has really been putting a lot of work into keeping this CASM effort moving forward. And so that's us at Denver Water, Northern Water, Colorado River District, St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District, LRE Water, CWCB, ASO, and then the Dolores Water Conservancy District. So thanks to all for all the many efforts as part of this CASM program. It's been a fun year, and I think with that, I'll pass it along to Jeff here to start diving into the season overview.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylor. Share my screen here. There we go. Cool. Yeah. Like Taylor said, it's been an exciting year. We are still flying in California, although we're starting to wind down out there. A few more flights. We could easily be flying well into August out there if the program had the funds for it, but we started flying in January in California, given how crazy the snow season was out there. So, but like Taylor said, we had our biggest year ever in both states, and we've got a number of the ASO crew on the call today, listening in, and just want to give them a shout out. A lot of work this year for the whole process. It was a challenging flight year with lots of, shall we say, interesting weather, and just a steady avalanche of data coming through and getting cranked out all the way through to our modeling teams. So big shout out to the ASO crew. Here's the list of the surveys that we did in Colorado this year. 2 flights each in the East Taylor, Dolores, Upper Roaring Fork, Upper South Platte, Colorado River main stem at Windy Gap, and the Blue River. And then single flights in the Conejos and the Northern Front Range. We had planned 2 flights in the Northern Front Range, but the weather conspired against us. I'll get to that again in a little bit. The map on the right shows the distribution of these basins, as well as where we have existing snow-free data sets, basically shovel-ready basins to expand the program into next year. So what we're looking at in this map is the accumulation of a lot of work from the CASM group, and all of you on the phone, stakeholders throughout these basins, putting together the flight programs, putting together the waterplane grant last year that funded a bunch of snow-free activities, etc. So the map and the flight dates list here gives an indication of the increase in activity, but it really doesn't even tell the whole story. It's been a long effort to get to this point, and thanks to all of you out there who have helped along the way and continue to do so. I will just kind of jump straight into basins here, and some of the results, and then I think Taylor said he was going to moderate a little bit, so we'll just go through basin by basin as I run through the results. Then we can have a bit of discussion from our operators and stakeholders who were putting these data to work in various ways. So we'll start with East and Taylor in the Upper Gunnison, mainly because these were the first flights, April 1st. And we had a second flight on May 23rd in each basin. The April 1st flights, we measured 344,000 acre feet in the East and 207 in the Taylor, and then dropping down to 178 and 91 by May 23rd. It was interesting, as we discussed maybe on the last stakeholder call, kind of an interesting flight timing with the second flight on this one, where depending on what your metric is for timing the second flight, if you're looking for the melt out of the snow stations, snow tail pillows, then we pretty much nailed it in the Taylor, but it was a bit early in the East. And had we done so based on the East River snowtails, the Taylor would have been basically melted out by that point, or somewhere close to it. So interesting flight timing aspect there. Probably a good example of where additional flights, like a third flight, would have been useful to kind of capture the melt progression at different stages in each of those basins. Regardless, you can see the comparison diagrams here showing that in the East, it was basically around 12.5 and below that we saw most of the melt between flights. Whereas in Taylor, we were seeing melting kind of all the way up to 13.5 or so, with the aspect distributions of the SWE and the SWE change kind of reflecting the different basin terrain geometries there. So we flew on April 1st. The large dust event that hit pretty much statewide to varying degrees occurred on April 3rd. So our April 1st albedos were pretty clean. And I didn't do a good job of labeling all of these figures here. But on the right, we can see a April 1st to May 31st comparison in the Taylor. So nice clean snow on April 1st, and then by May 23rd, that all that dust is really showing, and that's reflected in the albedos down below, with lots of albedos down in the 50% and lower range, leading to lots of dust enhanced snow melt. A couple images from the Taylor here showing some differential meltouts. So this is looking up the main stem Taylor towards Italian Basin, and kind of over into the Roaring Fork there where the data cuts off. So this was on the April 1st flight, and then the meltout late into May. We were seeing different behavior in the melt off in the different arms of the Taylor. If we look up towards Texas Creek and Cottonwood Pass here on April 1st, and then going into
Oh, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry about that. So we were seeing quite a bit more snow persistence in the east and southern portions of the Taylor than up in the north. And that was reflected in some of the, not just the SWE totals, but some of the model output as well. One interesting comparison to look at, I've only done it for the East and Taylor so far, but looking at our prior big year, 2019, in comparison to this year, we flew on April 1st this year and April 7th in 2019. In the East River, the snowtail stations on those dates were showing pretty much equivalent values, and fairly similar SWE, about 20,000 acre foot difference between the two. The spatial distribution of that SWE was different in each year. We can see the fine scale differences in the wind redistribution patterns up in the Northeast, and a lot of avalanche activity in 2019 that was not present in 2023, especially over there in the Northwest. And then down at the lower elevations, we're seeing more snow in the valley this year compared to 2019, and more snow in 2019 in the montane zone and the hill slopes between the valley and tree line. So kind of interesting distribution of changes between the 2 years, despite looking pretty similar or identical on the snow tells and pretty similar in SWE volume. If we pop over into the Taylor, we measured exactly the same volume of basin SWE on April 1st and 7th, 2023 and 2019. The snow tells were showing a pretty different picture between the 2 years. The spatial distribution changes between the 2 years were pretty similar to what we see over in the east. So some small scale wind drifting and avalanche patterns, especially above tree line, and then sort of a inverse pattern in the valley versus the hill slopes between the 2 years. So interesting way to look at kind of compare the two most recent big snowpack years in this basin most recently. I think that's all I have for the East and Taylor. Taylor, who do we have on from the Gunnison crew?
I think Beverly was gonna chime in from the Upper Gunnison.
Hi, everyone. I'm standing, well, I was originally supposed to be here and then Sonia was going to come and now I'm here. So she gave me a list of things that occurred to us based on this year's flights. The Upper Gunnison feels much more confident in planning our reservoir water releases from Taylor Reservoir having ASO flight data. It's helped with our continued improvements to our Taylor Reservoir Wharf Hydro model development. It's been beneficial to our communication with Gunnison County Emergency Planning Flood Preparedness Group this year because we had regular meetings and we could provide that information to them. Provided insight into what elevation snow is falling, which helps us in predicting potential for flood conditions. And as Jeff said, we didn't have this in 2019. And that was a year that a lot of the snow fell below 10,000 feet. And we were caught off guard. We gained additional insight into the contribution that Texas and Willow Creek subbasins in the Taylor with regard to their volumetric contribution to stream flow. And it's improved our estimates of SWE, as it's important to know when we have dry snow and wet snow. Improved insights into dust on snow, which has helped us a lot. Shown that it has potential to improve forecasting avalanche conditions and even knowing where we might regularly see avalanches happening on an annual basis. And improved our confidence in our communication with the public regarding what type of water year we were anticipating, snow conditions, timing of runoff, etc. And that's what I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Bev.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, super good insight there. And I'm excited to dive in a lot more into some of those lessons learned in the off season. I see Kenneth Hurst Williams on the line as well. Not sure if you want to chime in on kind of what you've seen in the data this year or planning to do with it.
Sure. So this is the first presentation that I've seen looking at this comparison between 2023 and 2019. It's super interesting. And Jeff will have a placeholder to have you give a presentation to the watershed science community in the next 4 or 5 months to really, begin to think about how to utilize this information in a way that starts looking at sort of functional aspects, if you will. So landscape characteristics that, lead to sort of repeated accumulation patterns versus distinguishing accumulation patterns, I think will be quite interesting for us. One of the other topics that, we're really hoping to start engaging in with these data sets is really to start to look at preferential patterns of accumulation and retention up around tree line, with really some forward-looking thinking that, with warming, with sort of differential Landsat satellite analysis that our team's done, we see, remarkable increases in forest health, particularly up at the upper subalpine. It's getting warmer. You're starting to transition from an energy to a water limited situation there. And so we might be predicting to see forest ingrowth and incursion to higher elevations, in the coming, well, certainly by, in century. And so beginning to think about how that incursion of forest into formerly alpine areas impacts snowpack accumulation retention, I think is a pretty exciting research question. So anyway, very, very helpful, not just to see kind of the nuts and bolts mechanics of the water volumetric estimates, and then how those feed the forecast stream flows and inflows that Dave Gotchis and his team have been doing, but really now to start thinking about mobilizing these multiple years of data that we're fortunate to have towards some fascinating and interesting research questions. That's all from me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, lots to do and lots to engage with the varied team that you're working with there in the SFA. All right, so we'll move over to the Dolores. We flew the Dolores on April 6th for the first flight, and measured 580,000 acre-feet of water. Big year, especially a couple of late season storms really bumped up the Dolores snowpack. Our second flight on May 25th showed 147,000 acre-feet, so quite a lot of melt in that month and a half. And I think in this case, the elevation plot on the top left really shows that, basically that area between the blue and the red curves there is all of the snow that was melted and run off in that time period. The albedo map comparison between the two dates, pretty clean snow on April 6th, even though the April 3rd dust event was in there lurking. That dust event was followed by some fresh snow, so we weren't really seeing much evidence of that on April 6th. We can start to see some hints of it down at the lowest elevations, where you start to see the wiggles in the albedo elevation plots. But really mostly fresh snow on top of the dust on April 6th. By late May, really strong albedo reductions, as evidenced by the maps on the right. One thing that we've started doing this year is having our albedo elevation plots and then a snowpack or a SWE volume plot right next to it, trying to match the scales. We'll work on that display going forward so that it's even tighter. But this gives an idea of how much of the elevation distribution of snow at this point in time is exposed to lower albedos. So in this case, it's pretty low albedo all the way up, but pretty strong reductions, especially in the middle elevations here. And that on May 25th, there's still a good bulk of snow left in those elevations, subject to that, to those enhanced melt rates there. I didn't get a chance to make any pretty pictures of the Dolores yet. Sorry, Ken. We'll get to that soon, but wanted to hand it off. See if Ken's got any thoughts on this year. I assume he's on here.
Ken actually last minute had to hop out into the field today, but Susan Bahari is on.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm kind of, approaching a much different level than Ken, because I'm not, I'm the hydraulic engineer that works for reclamation, and I oversee a lot of the operations more than the feed, but I'm not quite as in depth with.
Hey, Susan, we're having a little trouble hearing you. We can hear you, but maybe if you can speak closer to the mic or something.
Okay. Let me see if this is attached. Can you hear me better now?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay. Well,
That sounds better.
okay. Well, I'll try to keep it brief. But essentially, I've been comparing the ASO flight values to what I would normally use, just to see if they're giving me additional insight. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I just want to make sure I'm not just talking over.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to compare them to what I would normally use, and just see if there would be a difference in what I would recommend for McPhee operations as far as spilling. You know, I'm not doing the boater flow stuff as much as deep as Ken and Robert would be, but you know, I'm more paying attention to whether or not we're going to spill the reservoir. And as you guys have probably remember, or maybe were here at the time when the San Miguel Basin was going really, really high, much higher than we expected, much earlier than we expected. I think that dust layer really made a big impact. So seeing that emerge was definitely helpful. What was interesting, though, is that the ASO snowpack volumes that were recorded during the flights was significantly less than what I was getting for data from SNODOS, which is what I would normally be using to just monitor the snowpack that is still remaining in the mountains. So, you know, we would go off the forecasts, you know, the forecasts from the CDRFC, so I was using those as well. But I am kind of curious. I mean, I realize that there's going to be a difference, but if I had just gone off of the ASO, I might have slightly, I don't know if I would have underestimated or if it would have been overestimated or what, but I'm noticing that the SNODOS data I normally would have used was quite a bit higher, which would have only been important during that period of time in late April, early May, when we were kind of looking at spill, the potential for spill. But I also noticed that the work hydro forecasts that I was receiving were pretty much coordinated almost exactly with what I was receiving from NRCS, CDRFC. I would have made I think we would have made pretty good decisions with that as well. So, I mean, overall, I think it came off really well, especially seeing those dust layers emerge was really helpful in those early parts of the season when we were looking at potential for spill. Yeah, I mean, I just kind of watched it as it emerged throughout the season, and it was interesting to see the differences between the different models. So hopefully you got 50% of what I just said, because I hope my microphone is working.
We got it.
Yeah, at least 95%.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Susan, that's interesting. We've seen in comparisons elsewhere with SNODAS that it's not uncommon that SNODAS is quite a bit high. The little I've poked at that, it seems to be an overestimation at upper altitudes, where it seems to rely on some kind of lapsing to get to accumulate snow above where we have station data. I'd hesitate to say that that's universally the case, but I've seen that quite frequently where SNODAS is high.
Yeah, just something I want to
sometimes even double the amount of snow that we're measuring.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, it's just something I want to look into because, you know, I believe that the flight data is the correction, right? So, you know, that's the in situ data of the entire, you know, the analog space of the basin. But I'm usually, without ASO data, operating using the SNODOS data, right? So I kind of want to see, is this a universal effect, like you just said, or what decisions would be made differently? And even if it is more correct, I kind of worry that if I had thought that there was less snow there than there was, you know, because I did see this ASO data come through and I thought, okay, it's maybe not as much as it was. But I'm so glad that we kept the release really high because I think the potential for spill was there. So yeah, it creates kind of an interesting additional piece of information. I to be honest, not quite sure what to do with yet, but I am glad to at least know the number and the difference between that and the SNODOS is what I'm normally looking at without ASO data.
And Jeff, I'm not sure if you have this slide later in, but we looked at just comparing like the first flight last year volume to the first flight this year volume in the basins where we were able to do that. And with both those flights being right about at peak SWE. And so like for the Dolores this year, as Jeff showed, the first flight was like 580,000 acre feet was measured. And last year in the Dolores, the first flight measured 188,000 acre feet. So this year, volume was about 3.1 times last year's volume. And that kind of varies as you then go across the state, where like in the Blue River Basin above Dillon, we had like 1.2 times the volume this year compared to last year. So just different ways of looking at that data as well.
Yeah, great point, Taylor. I did not include that slide, so thanks for bringing it up. And we definitely saw some variation across the state here. It wasn't universally a crazy high snowpacks. So, all right, unless there was any other thoughts. Thank you, Susan, for chiming in there. I really appreciate the insights. Moving up to the Roaring Fork. This was the first year we've flown in the Roaring Fork headwaters. We did a demo project in Castle and Maroon Creeks back in 2019. So we have a little bit of comparison to make in a part of the watershed, but this is our first acquisition of large areas of the Roaring Fork. I'm gonna move my Zoom thing here. There we go. On April, we split the first flight over 2 days due to some aircraft issues that we had, but counted 589,000 acre feet in the combined Upper Roaring Fork and Frying Pan in early April, and then 315,000 on May 28th. By that May 28th date, almost all the snowtails were melted out in the basin, save for Schofield Pass, which is over in the Crystal, where we didn't actually fly, but that was kind of the last remaining station data point going. But obviously still quite a bit of snow left at that point in time. We did see some accumulating snow in the intervening period. You could see that kind of on the north-facing high elevation aspects in the lower right radial plot there. There was probably a good bit more than that even that had melted out. We did see some of the extreme dust in the Roaring Fork covered up and then re-exposed a couple of times during that period. To my eye, the worst dust in the state has been in the Roaring Fork. Pretty nasty from that April 3rd storm, dust storm. Even by April 12th, we were seeing really heavy dust load and albedo reductions from that event. There, and the elevation distribution on the bottom left here really highlights that. So even in early April, we're still seeing visible albedos down around 50% in the lower elevations, and really nothing that looks like clean snow except for some really small patches, like is evident in that top right photograph. And by 28th of May, it was only enhanced in the distribution of those lower albedos. A few more pictures here showing some of the distribution. Again, pretty. Let me go back to this. The map image on the left here. It shows the pretty strong gradient in accumulation from down in Elk Range, so Snowmass Creek, Castle and Maroon, up to the Frying Pan, which is a little bit lower elevation, but even the high elevations in the Frying Pan weren't seeing nearly as much snow as down in the Elks. And so as we tour through here, you can start to see that the snow depth scale on color scale on these is the same throughout. Lots of 2 meter plus here in the Maroon Bells, and even in May, some late lying persistent deep snow patches there. If we look into Upper Snowmass Creek, lots of deep snow up high. Even in April, we're starting to see the south-facing aspects lower down in the watershed melt out. That's not atypical. And then by May, again, lots of deep snow still left up, especially around Snowmass Peak, I guess that's why it's called that. Even though we're losing a lot of the lower elevations. Moving up into the Upper Castle Creek zone here, I'm always astonished at how varied the snowpack is in this area. Just lots of crazy wind redistribution patterns that persist into the late season. And then as we go into the Upper Roaring Fork, you're seeing a lot fewer areas of deep blue color here, kind of more confined to wind drift pockets. And by May, lots of shallow snow here, starting to melt out even in the higher elevation valleys. So let's see, who do we have on from, I think I saw DK on there, and maybe Steve Hunter.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and good afternoon, everybody. You know, this is all fascinating, really valuable data. But having said that, you know, because it's its first year, it's extremely hard to put into context, you know, besides that one experimental flight that Deems mentioned in 2019, it's hard to really compare. And I haven't done any intercomparison with Snowdass or other. Some interesting things that I'm seeing, and I'm going to pass it over to Steve and Garrett for their input. You know, we focus pretty much in the frying pan for operations of root eye. However, in years like this, where, you know, essentially there's enough to go around, the decision making is somewhat easy, right? We don't have the true operators, which is the Eastern Area Office of Reclamation, on the call as I'm looking. If I'm missing that, let me know. But we're also maybe unique this year, comparison to other basins. We're seeing seasonal high runoff probably today for the it's attributed to operations of the trans basins. So again, for folks that are not familiar with the Roaring Fork, we have significant exports in the upper Roaring Fork and in the frying pan. Those not based on water supply, but based on demands on the east slope, based on how wet it is, have recently turned off, from what I understand, or decreased. So it's really hard to parse out, you know, what exactly is going on, whether it's a decrease in depletions and exports in combination with this warming we've have. But it's a fascinating thing, and I think, you know, the proof will be in the pudding as we go forward and get a few more years. We also, I think, we're hamstrung a little bit with some later than hoped for flow forecasts. Again, the first year that WRF Hydro was run at a lot of these nodes, and so we've got some work to do in sort of our post-year analysis, and as we talked about, lessons learned. So for us, we're just scratching the surface, I think, and I'd pass it over to others in the Roaring Fork to hear other input.
Yeah, this is Steve Hunter. Thanks, DK. Yeah, like DK said, you know, we had that 2019 data set from Castle and Maroon, which has been interesting to look at that, because actually one of those basins had more snow in 2019 than it did in 20, so they kind of flipped, which was interesting. But seeing the distribution of snow in those watersheds is pretty incredible. And also, like Jeff was saying, we draw our water primarily out of Castle Creek and then a secondary supply out of Maroon Creek. And either my wife's forefathers were extremely brilliant or extremely lucky picking those creeks over the Roaring Fork due to those trans-mountain diversions. We'll see greater flows in those. So with this, we're starting to basically put together an enhanced hydrologic monitoring and measurement program for those two watersheds to get a better understanding of our own hydrologic reality up here. Both those basins don't have any snow tells in them, so we use Independence Pass, Schofield, and others as kind of surrogates to help us plan. So this is going to be extremely helpful. I saw Carl's on the call. We are working with NRCS to get a snow tell hopefully up in Castle Creek, because more data is better data. We have a very small reservoir and we don't use much of anything. We don't need to plan for releases. It's just pretty much a detention pond, if you will. So our biggest reservoir that we like to have a handle on is the snowpack. We do watch the reservoir operations at Root Eye and other places, because at Root Eye we have a hydroelectric plant that we generate local renewable energy from. A lot of the things we're doing with ASO, at least in the short term, is it's helping us to get a better understanding on our drought mitigation and response plan. So we've been in a stage 2 drought water shortage since September of 2020. And last week we dropped that to a stage 1. Always trying to be cognizant of saving water and water conservation, but that, along with SNOTEL and other data sets, and Dave Gotchis and his team with Wharf Hydro, gave us extreme confidence to drop out of that with other metrics. Just trying to see if there's anything else. Yeah, like we've mentioned earlier, April 3rd dust event really hit us hard in the Roaring Fork. What we're surprised about is how much snow is holding on south of town, way up there in the Elks, in the snowmass, upper Maroon and upper Castle, which is great. And we thought that dust would nuke us, which it did down low, but there's still snowpack holding on up high. That may change here because we've been going from a pretty wet and cold spring to summer literally started on the 21st here in the Roaring Fork. So we'll see how that pans out. But we've also at the water treatment plant been dealing with that dust, which is interesting. So the operators see that dust, which sneaks through our filters, and then we have to treat it, which can be problematic. But the runoff, the receding limb of the hydrograph here out in the Roaring Fork has been almost perfect this year. So we'll take it.
Awesome. Thanks, DK and Steve. I can't really see the whole attendee list here. Anyone else on from Roaring Fork or Twin Lakes or Southeastern?
Yeah, this is Garrett Marcus with Southeastern, and I think DK summarized it pretty well in the original part, that this is a new data set. So figuring out how to use it and compare it to historical is tough, but in this case, we got to start someplace. The nice thing that Southeastern and the Bureau of Reclamation use is we've always said that our lowest or the highest SNOTEL sites are at our lowest diversions. So SNOTEL is a great indicator, but it really doesn't tell anything about our actual tributary area. So this is a good indicator of what's actually up there and not just these point values. So as we start developing this data set and getting some historical values, it'll be extremely valuable in the future, but we're just really trying to gather and get our hands wrapped around what it means and what it's saying and how to put it to beneficial use. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Garrett. My internet keeps dropping here, which is why my screen share keeps going in and out. So I'm going to keep my video off. Hopefully that helps me along here. All right. Okay. Moving through the season, on April 16th, we had our first 3-flight day in Colorado. We had 2 planes in the air at the same time in the Blue River and in the South Platte. And then one of those went back up and flew the Colorado Windy Gap later in that afternoon. So big day for us. And as the season progressed, we came to value that efficient data collection as the weather started giving us problems later on. So moving into the Colorado River headwaters, we flew that April 16th and then again on May 27th, moving from 533,000 acre feet down to 197 in that interval. Relatively clean snowpack at the middle and upper elevations on the 16th. Getting into later May, we were seeing some albedo reductions due to dust. It was certainly present, but not nearly to the same magnitude as we were seeing in the Roaring Fork. Definitely some impact there and dust enhanced snow melt going on, but not quite as great as feared. Some images of mostly down here in the Fraser in this case, and the Moffett system. That's looking at town of Fraser and Winter Park ski area there. Am I back?
You're back.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, really frustrating. Looking at Berthoud Pass, this is some of the deeper snow in the watershed is in, first, second, Current Creek, et cetera. You can see the highway going up to Berthoud Pass there. And a lot of that deep snow persisting late into the season, even as
Hey, Jeff, if you wanted to send one of us
Give him
your
a sec. I think he just got kicked. Give him a sec to come back.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it's happening like every 30 seconds.
If you wanted to send one of us your slides, maybe we could run it, and you could talk through it.
Let me let's pause for a couple minutes. Let me try to fix something. I'll be right back.
Okay. Anybody have any good stories? No good stories so far. Oh, I have something to share. Anybody was anybody a part of the wild hailstorm in Denver last night? I
Were you at Red Rocks last night?
was not at Red Rocks, but let me share this photo from my front yard.
Wow, any damage to your place?
Fortunately, no damage. My car was parked on the street, but it was under a big tree. So I think I just got one little hail nick on my car. So that was pretty fortunate. Couple cars that were more in the open got a little more damage, but not terrible. And roof managed okay. So all in all, fared pretty well, but it was pretty wild.
Wow. And you guys looking for more energy this afternoon?
I know a storm's supposed to be coming. Hopefully it's not another hailstorm.
Any stories from the southeast? If Garrett, you're still on, I heard some pretty impressive floods on Fountain and on the Arkansas.
Yeah, there's some pretty decent flooding going on, especially on the Fountain and right at Fountain. I think they got close to 5 inches locally. It wasn't very widespread through the Arkansas Basin, but there's a couple very local points that were pretty high rainfalls and flash flooding. I was gonna see if I could share a screen, but I had a photo set on 25th Lane out on the Mesa in the Bessemer area of a flat hailstone about the size of a DVD. And so, yeah, so it's roughly probably 4 inches, but flat, not round at all. As a kind of a disc. And so, but it didn't seem to be very widespread either. But the people that got hail last night got it pretty tough.
Do you have that picture to share? Oh,
No, I'm on my phone, so maybe that's where the issues come from.
Well, I thought I saw Jeff just pop back on, but while we're waiting, just to give you all a quick little heads up. So next month is the July CWCB board meeting, and we will be doing a CASM update for my board just to let them all know about the same information that you're seeing today, get them up to speed on what we've been doing this year and prep them for another presentation in November to talk more about the program as it exists and how it could potentially exist in CWCB. So wanted to give you all a heads up about that. We are still working behind the scenes to make sure our board is up to speed and see what we can do in terms of making this a fully fledged program.
Do you have a location for that?
July is going to be in Montrose. I don't know exactly where just yet. Andrew, do you?
Actually, I don't know if the exact location yet, but yeah, Montrose, I'm just not sure.
So we should know shortly where exactly the board meeting will be and what date this presentation will occur on and total time, but we haven't even had the request yet for agenda items. We just know that we're going to be on it.
thanks, Eric. Who was that just shared that hail photo there? Is that Garrett?
That was Garrett.
Nice. Yeah, that was a big one.
The crazy one.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, looks like you're back.
Cool.
Good to go.
We'll see. Fingers crossed. Yeah, good time to hand it off to Fraser and Windy Gap folks. I think I saw Graham and Emily on.
Hi, yeah, I can talk a little bit about things from Northern's perspective. So we, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. We have been focusing mostly on the Granby and Willow Creek inflows for analysis so far, though we're also interested in the Fraser. We compared the April flight SWE volume to April 1st forecasts, and they were all slightly higher than the April 1st forecast, which gave us some more confidence in the April 1st forecast because that was what we would expect. And that gave us confidence in decisions that we made based on projections that our system would fill, like not pumping Windy Gap water, making preemptive releases from Willow Creek, and timing outages within the system. I also compared the change in the SWE from the April flight to the May flight to the estimated natural flow between the flight dates to get a rough runoff efficiency. And I got about 70% for that time between the two flights. The WRF hydro forecast, we're still working through a couple issues at those locations, but the Willow Creek forecast was similar to other agency forecasts and Granby was a bit higher. I also did some comparison of the elevation distribution between the April flights last year and the April flight this year. Obviously, there's much more snow at all elevations this year compared to last year, but that was especially true at the lowest elevations. So there's 73% more snow at the 9,000 to 10,000 foot elevation band, and 269% more snow at the 8,000 to 9,000 foot band. Also, the SNODAS SWE volume we noticed was greater than the ASO data in these basins as well. And we're in the process of a lot of different analysis using this data to better understand the hydrology of our basins. So overall, the ASO data and these basins gave us some more confidence in our forecasts, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to do some more analysis. And we're working on processes to incorporate the ASO data into our forecast models and decision-making processes once we have a few more years of data.
This is Graham. I can jump in real quick also on kind of the USGS perspective. We're really excited and utilizing these ASO data sets more kind of on a research side of things, primarily utilizing ASO as sort of an evaluation, validation type data set for various efforts we're working on. One of the key efforts we have going right now is, developing capabilities in snow modeling, so sort of physically based, spatially distributed snow modeling. And one of the big challenges with that type of model is we often don't have data sets we can use to evaluate these spatial products, and ASO really kind of provides these awesome data sets to be able to look at how well the models perform over space. We've kind of been really trying to utilize remotely sent snow cover area data from Landsat and Sentinel satellites, and trying to see how those fine resolution satellite data sets can help improve some of our snow modeling, utilizing some of these repeatable patterns that our snowpack show. And the ASO data sets really kind of have been able to confirm some of this research that we can really improve some of our modeling using some of these more widely available satellite data sets. And then, on the observation side, we're also doing a lot of work with UAS drone-based technologies, as well as kind of new snow monitoring stations that we're running and developing. And again, kind of doing comparisons of how our data sets compare to the ASO is really important. I think one of the things that Jeff has shown in the slides and Emily just mentioned is, the elevation distribution of our snowpack is really important. And so trying to, seeing that distribution in ASO and then realizing maybe where we need to, put more targeted observations and stations over elevation ranges is kind of an important research goal from our perspective. So that's all I have. Thanks.
And I'll just chime in real quick on the Fraser system part of this flight. So we measured that in our Denver Waters Moffett collection system in the Fraser system, there's about 104,000 acre feet of SWE in that first flight that was done. And just based on, historical statistical relationships that we have, we would have, without the ASO data, anticipated about 60,000 acre feet of runoff out of that system. And so, that's quite a bit lower than probably what we would expect to come out of 104,000 acre feet of snow, water equivalent. So we're looking forward to kind of postseason doing analysis on how those actually line up at the end of the season.
Cool. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to march ahead here while I still have connectivity. Moving to over to the Blue River, again, same date, April 16th for the first flight, and then second flight on May 29th. ASO crew and some Denver Water folks, including Taylor, were in the field for that around that first flight, and noticed that the dust from April 3rd wasn't nearly as severe in the blue as elsewhere to the west, which was surprising to me. That we do see some impact, especially in the late season albedos, not nearly as severe as elsewhere. Went from 183,000 acre feet on April 16th to 78,000 on May 29th. The snow tails were holding on longer, it seemed, in this basin. Might be a little bit influenced by Fremont Pass, which is in this plot here, which does seem to persist snow later than other stations, but also no doubt effects of the lesser dust impacts in this basin than elsewhere. Let's see, here's what the full basin looked like on April 16th, and then again in late May, and some more pictures of Breckenridge here, showing that melt out pattern. Oh, and Copper Mountain as well. Taylor, this is back to you on this one.
Great, yeah, thanks, Jeff. We were just looking a bit into, again, comparing that first flight from last year to the first flight from this year, which were both flown approximately at peak SWE. And we were looking at, so we have 4 snowtail stations within this basin. And just averaging the 4 snowtail stations. So in 2022, the average on the date of the flight of SWE was 15.2 inches across those 4 stations. And then this year, on the date of that peak SWE flight, the average was 15 inches. So approximately, the same snowtail average for these 2 flights across 2 years. And then, as you can see, this year's ASO flight during that time showed 33,000 more acre feet of SWE. So quite a big difference when the snowtail average across the basin was pretty much the same. Even the average was a little bit less this year. So, I'm a huge snowtail supporter. I think it's an absolutely incredible network we have, and we need to continue supporting and expanding it. Steve, it was cool to hear that y'all are citing a new site up there in the Roaring Fork. And as we know, these ASO flights are dependent on this snowtail network to establish density estimates. And this also know there's limitations to what the network can tell us about full basin snowpack conditions. And so this just helps provide some insight into further insight we can gain from these ASO volume measurements that again are dependent on that snowtail network as well. And we're excited to continue exploring these and find out how we can leverage snowtail data and ASO data in different ways, because they really do work in tandem. And with this information this year, having that higher estimate actually provided us confidence to directly make the decision to increase our flows out of Dillon Reservoir. We were at the minimum flows earlier in the season, and then with this information, we actually increased those flows with the confidence that we'd still fill that reservoir. So it directly influenced those operations decisions there. So again, just to emphasize, snowtail network is absolutely amazing, and this provides further insight to build upon that snowtail network.
Cool, thanks, Taylor. I think you said Nathan is out today.
Yeah, Nathan's actually, so yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of Nathan here, who is our raw water supply manager at Denver Water, and more directly is using this data to make those operations decisions. He actually recently had his second child, and everybody's happy and healthy, and he's out on paternity leave.
Awesome. Well, good deal. Thanks for sitting in. We can hop over the hill into the South Platte. Again, first time we've flown this basin. Same date, April 16th, and then a day apart, or maybe a couple days apart for the May flights from the blue, from 106,000 acre feet down to 59. And a pretty extreme difference, as I think Taylor will speak to here in a moment, between just over the hill in the blue and then into the South Platte. You can see we did gain a bit of snow at the highest elevations between the April and May flights, but lost a good half of the snowpack, mostly at the middle and lower elevations. Again, definitely some dust impacts here, but not nearly what we were seeing in the Roaring Fork. So kind of similar to the blue in that respect. Maybe a slightly greater impact at the lowest elevations. Could also be some local dust mixed into there, given the high wind environment in we'll get used to this, I guess. So same color scheme as in the other images that I've been showing, but this is the April flight. So you can already see just by the prevalence of red colors here that a lot lower snow accumulations in the upper South Platte than elsewhere. Just looking down the Mosquito Range. This is town of Jefferson out in the flats there, and then Kenosha to Georgia Pass. And then Guanella Pass and the old ski area there in the lower center. Here you go, Taylor.
Yeah, so we were just doing a little comparison of since the Blue River Basin and Upper South Platte Basin are really adjacent basins that are next to each, split by the Continental Divide. We were looking at how snow compares across those two basins, and we're looking, so this is the mean sweep depth of all the ASO pixels at these elevation bands in these two basins. And so, I think we had heard anecdotally going through the season that the South Platte is having less snow than on the other side of the divide. And I think this really highlights that. So you can see like at the 11 to 12,000 foot elevation range, which is really where a good majority of our snow water equivalent is going to be. The snow depth in the South Platte Basin is about half of the snow depth in the Blue River Basin. So pretty wild being right on the other side of the Continental Divide there, adjacent basins, and getting about half the snow depth across the majority of the elevation bands, and even less than half at those lower elevations. So we're excited to keep learning more. It was cool that these two basins were flown on the same day. So this is a direct, comparison from the same day, and we're excited to keep exploring this moving forward.
Yeah, cool. That translated into volumes as well, with the flight area that we flew in the South Platte being almost double the Blue River area, but with a good bit less snow in that snow volume in the South Platte than in the blue. So yeah, really interesting to see that contrast over a pretty short distance. All right, as we got into May, the weather, as most of you who reside in the Front Range will attest to, got kind of unusually wet. we were struggling to find flight dates for the Front Range basins that had clear weather for us to fly. And we ended up, and this persisted down the Caneos as well. In early May, we managed to sneak in a flight on May 5th, and then entered kind of a holding pattern for the Front Range basins. But so the Caneos, we had one flight funded this year, so we kind of split the difference between peak SWE and station meltout. We on this May 5th flight measured 240,000 acre feet and saw some significant dust impacts, especially at lower elevations, and they were evident in the imagery as well. And definitely having an impact on the snow melt. I thought I had an image posted in there as well, but sorry, I don't. Again, not quite as strong. It's Roaring Fork seems to be, and maybe the Upper Gunnison seemed to be the epicenter of that dust deposition, at least in the basins that we flew this year. Let's see, do we have Nathan on from Caneos?
This is Craig. I think Nathan had to jump off, so I'll talk a bit about the Caneos River. So, you know, it's one of the good things about the ASO, and one of the things that we use the most is to determine the percentage of our snow that's above Platoro Reservoir. So for those of you that don't know, Platoro Reservoir is basically our only major reservoir on the Caneos system, and that's the only thing that we can use to try to control some of these higher stream flows that we have. And so we know that whatever is coming into the Platoro area, we do have the ability to hold that and then later release it for flood purposes. But anything else is just going to come out, and so that's a very important thing to know, how much snow and what percentage of the snow is above that Platoro gauging station in Platoro Reservoir. So that's very helpful with the ASO data. You know, it's one of those things where we had one flight this year, and with all the snow, it would have been interesting to see what another flight would have showed us. But anyway, the one flight was definitely helpful. And we've done a little bit of studying too, and it's kind of an interesting thing. The May stream flow on the Caneos system was the second highest in the last 55 years for us. So we had a lot of water coming out in the month of May, but just because of the cooler and wetter weather that we had, our peak wasn't too much greater than our average peak. So that was kind of an interesting thing. One of the main benefits too of the ASO is Dave Gotchis and with his WRF hydro forecasting and using the ASO data to adjust that WRF hydro forecast. And so we've been able to get several forecasts from Dave, and they're really good. It's interesting as well because those forecasts from Dave are just a little bit higher than the NRCS forecasts and then the Weather Service forecasts. So it's going to be interesting to see what we come up with as we get through the season here. So overall, I think we're very happy with the ASO flights on the Caneos system and what they're providing us. I will put in my usual plug for a snow-free flight on the Rio Grande Basin as well this year, if we can get one, and then maybe start getting some snow flights on the Rio Grande Basin as well next year, and that would be very helpful for us too. So thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, that's part of the plan. Hopefully this summer.
Great.
Rio Grande. Yeah. All right. Moving along here. We finally started getting some marginal flight weather in the Northern Front Range. This is the same day as the Caneos on May 5th. So we got Clear Creek and Boulder Creek, sorry, not May 5th, May 9th. Clear Creek and Boulder Creek on the same flight. And then kind of worked our way north over the period of the next few days. We measured 82,000 acre feet in Clear Creek, definitely down from the peak. So we're looking at kind of a mid-melt map here. Definitely some albedo impacts that we're seeing from dust, but still a good bit of clean snow or cleanish snow up at the highest elevation.
Thanks everybody for hanging in there. I think we're almost through the rest of our flights here. And then we'll have Cody go over those CBRFC results. So Jeff, looks like you got back on there.
Man, it's so frustrating. Okay, thanks for your patience, everybody. Maybe I'll just march up the front range here, and then we can look at each of these kind of as one group. Boulder Creek again, same day, May 9th, 73,000 acre feet in Boulder and South Boulder Creeks combined. There's the image with South Boulder Creek on the left, and then City of Boulder, Green Lakes, etc., watershed up the top right. You can see the heavy wind patterns on Niwot Ridge. So tip of the cap to all the researchers up there who deal with that on a regular basis. Just to the north, St. Vrain and left hand. It took us until May 21st to get a window here. 67,000 acre feet by this point. Most of that, of course, in the St. Vrain. And there's what those basins were looking like. You know, throughout the Front Range, not really a surprise, heavily wind influenced environment for the snow there, but it's pretty cool to see all those patterns. And then up into the Big and Little Thompsons. By the time we got this flown, same flight as St. Vrain left hand on May 21st, very little snow left in the Little Thompson, but a good bit still up in the park with 68,000 acre feet. And then moving up into the Poudre. At this point, the Alberta wildfires started kicking smoke down our way, and that added to the already challenging flight coordination, flight timing. So not only were we trying to dodge actual clouds and precipitation, but then we had tons of smoke as well. This is what it looked like from the aircraft over the Poudre. We could sort of see the ground visually. This precluded us from getting any albedo measurements because it looks just like this to our cameras. But the LiDAR can see right through, with hardly any impact at all. So we did get a good depth and sweep retrieval for the Poudre on May 22nd at 121,000 acre feet. And a few images here. In these images, I've put the Cameron Peak fire outline in this gray boundary. And as we step back from Cameron Pass there at the top left, we can see that the sort of aspect neutral and anything sort of middle and lower elevation and south facing in that fire scar is pretty much melted out by May 22nd, but with decent snow persisting outside that fire scar.
All right, so close. Back there, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm back. I think that's all I had for the Front Range. Is it Emily? Are you going to speak to Front Range basins? I think Scott was busy today.
Yeah, Emily again. Scott had a couple things for me to pass on. He said as Jeff said, the clouds and weather prevented a peak snowpack flight this year. But the weather this year does seem like an outlier from all the storms we had. And we anticipate being able to conduct flights in April in the future, but we definitely learned how weather can have a big impact on this process. We canceled our second flight this year because a flight in June wouldn't provide much more value, but we're planning to use that toward flights next year, hopefully. Scott presented the reports from the May flights to the South Platte Basin Roundtable, and there was a lot of interest and support for the work. And then as far as insights gained, because the area is so large, it took 3 separate ASO flights to get full coverage, which requires additional logistics, and it led to the May flights occurring on different days, as Jeff described. He also said there's still lots of snow that the ASO flight measured in the northeast face under the trees that couldn't be clearly seen or quantified by visual inspection from the ground or from the air. So those are some of the things that Scott wanted to pass on. And then from Northern's perspective, I looked at the Poudre, Big Thompson, St. Vrain, and Boulder Creek, because those are basins of interest to Northern specifically. And I compared them with the June 1st seasonal forecasts. I just added the ASO SWE volume totals to the naturalized flow estimates for the previous part of the season and compared those to the forecast. You know, it's very, not very scientific, but just to look at a bit of a comparison. And all of the ASO plus flow totals were equal to or higher than the forecast, except for the Poudre, but that makes sense because the North Fork wasn't included in the ASO flight. So that one will require some more analysis to estimate the North Fork contribution. And then the Boulder ASO plus flow is much higher than the forecast, while the Big Thompson was about the same. So it'll be interesting to see how the flow totals work out this year at the end of the season and do some analysis into the runoff efficiency for the different basins. For WRF hydro forecasts, they're experimental for the Front Range at this point and need to be recalibrated with the historical naturalized flow data. But the ones in our basins seem to be pretty close to the June 1st forecasts in most basins. The other agency June 1st forecasts in most basins. There's also some interesting elevation distribution information that I looked into, just comparing the different basins, and they all had pretty similar. Those 4 that I looked at, the Poudre, Big Thompson, St. Vrain, and Boulder Creek, all had pretty similar elevation distribution of the mean SWE. In inches, not in volume. I didn't look at that, but the middle band had the highest mean SWE in most of the basins, but the Poudre was the outlier, and that was interesting because there was a higher mean SWE in the higher elevation bands. So I don't think that was just because the Poudre had an earlier flight, because we didn't see a similar pattern with the earlier flights in the Windy Gap Basin, but it'll be interesting to look at that if we can get some more, future flights in these basins. Those are some of the interesting things that I saw. Overall for Northern, the Front Range ASO flights give us some more confidence in the forecasts, and the data can be used for more analysis to understand the hydrology of the basins. And with more years of data, we're hoping we can incorporate this data into our forecasting and decision-making at Northern Water. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
All right, I've got one more slide, and it's Taylor's to talk to, and then maybe I can stop torturing you with my intermittent connectivity here.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been surprisingly not too torturous. At least you've been able to get back on quickly. I feel like that's usually
So weird.
yeah. But yeah, thanks everyone for sticking with us here. I think one thing just to point out is, these are all the flights that we did this year in Colorado, with the first flights there in the left column, and then the second flights there in the right with the volumes and acre feet listed. And again, those first flights are, they're designed, they were in this year's program, they were designed to be as close to peak SWE as possible, as Jeff kind of laid out. That didn't necessarily happen in some basins, especially on the northern Front Range, particularly due to weather. But, if you imagine that these are all peak SWE flights, Jeff, did you put that number on? There we go. So if you sum up all those volumes, you get about 3,029,000 acre feet. And so, if we imagine that all these flights were conducted on peak SWE, exactly peak SWE in each one of these basins, this is the measurement of how much water is in our snowpack reservoir in these basins. We are all, familiar with, we talk colloquially that the snowpack is our largest reservoir here in Colorado, but previously we haven't really had a way to accurately measure the volume of how much water is actually in that reservoir. And we are getting closer to being able to do that. You can imagine that if we have these peak SWE volume numbers in every basin across the state in a given year, that would be the volume at peak SWE of the snowpack reservoir. And of course, there are many nuances and subtleties that come from there when more snow comes throughout the season, and snow that is already lost to melt and sublimation, before peak SWE. But this is a way for us to be able to measure this snowpack reservoir in Colorado. So just something to think about as we continue to build out this work. That's all I have.
Thanks for that, Taylor. All right. I think I will stop there unless anyone has any questions or comments, but I want to make sure we get Cody some time to give his presentation.
Any additional questions, comments for Jeff here today? Seems like not. Feel free to throw them in the chat if they come up. But I think, Cody, if you want to load up your slides and go over the CBRFC results.
Sure. So sharing my screen here. Can you see that okay and hear me? All right.
All coming through good.
Okay, so just wanted to give a brief summary of results from our modeling side of things using ASO data in our water supply forecast for locations that we provide water supply forecasts. Somewhat of a repeat here with April meeting, but basically we're just we're grabbing that ASO 50-meter SWE data set and computing a mean aerial SWE for each catchment in our model. And then we're running that through our ESP model to come up with a probabilistic stream flow forecast, and then putting together this one-page experimental forecast with some information about what it is and a graphic representation, and then as well a table on the day of the flight. So starting here in the Gunnison River Basin, so again, so we start issuing our model guidance in mid to late December here at the beginning of this plot, and then you can see how it evolves over the season. So fairly easily to point out when we saw some additional storms and snow accumulate. This is the east at Almont. So you can see the blue cyan type lines and points that would be our experimental water supply forecast that uses that ASO suite data. So here, flight on April 1st and May 23rd. So going to show, I think, 8 of these graphics for all the flights this season. And these graphics were made about a week after we issued our June 1st water supply forecast, so they're a bit dated. So we got the graphic here, and then so the dotted line starting April 1st shows the observed streamflow volume, unregulated volume accumulation. And then the table here, it's focusing really, I think, on the ESP 50 column here is probably best. So that May 23rd flight above East Almont, the experimental, so the ASO SWE, using that in our model, about 20,000 acre feet lower than our operational snow states on that day at East at Almont.
Just one question about this graphic.
Yeah.
Is the reason that the sort of the cumulative observed volume line, that it doesn't match the ESP 50 line because there's significant management and the bottom lines are just gauge flow?
So the dotted line is the observed accumulation to date, whereas this is a April through July. So a perfect forecast, this dotted line would go up, and then, you know, come the end of July, it would come up to this volume.
I see. Yeah. So it's cut off to not the actual end of the season.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. So come the end of the year, you know, when we have that observed volume, makes it a little bit easier for verification purposes anyway. Does that make sense, Paige?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just didn't realize the graph was cut off like that.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see both flights this year in this basin, lower snow from ASO compared to what we had operationally in our model on those dates. Sticking with the Gunnison, this is Taylor Park. Again, ASO SWE above this location lower than our model by about 15,000 acre feet. That was back on May 23rd. And then in the Dolores here, you can see the 2 ASO flights. The first ASO flight, the snow above Dolores, at Dolores, higher than our model on that day. And then the second flight, pretty similar. I mean, just given how much water's up there, it's kind of surprising to see only about an 8,000 acre feet difference between our Snow 17 snow states and the ASO estimated snow above this location in the Dolores. And then moving into the frying pan, this is the Rudai water supply forecast that we issue. ASO higher here by about 12,000 acre feet for that inflow volume forecast into Rudai. And then Dillon, fairly similar. It's not too much difference here between ASO SWE and our model SWE on for both flights, coming within about 1,000 acre feet on that May 29th flight. And then for Willow Creek here, fairly similar story. You can see some additional snow here in early May with that May 27th flight, the snow being fairly similar to our model snow. And then this is above Granby, again, that Windy Gap flight on May 27th. So here, ASO SWE run through our ESP model, resulting in about 20,000 acre feet more than our ESP model guidance on that day. in Fraser, Winter Park. So this is a pretty small catchment compared to the others, with the difference here between our operational snow model and ASO SWE, just about 1,000 acre-feet. And here's a scatter plot. So now we have this is showing the last 2 water years, all the ASO flights and how the SWE compares between our model and the ASO mean aerial SWE for all the catchments that the flights cover for the last 2 water years. So last year, this would be 92 elevation zones, and then this year 104. So pretty interesting. It's kind of a few things that I'm noticing, just looking at below 10 inches here. Typically ASO SWE higher than our model, and then we see fairly, evenly dispersed points, 10 to 30 inches or so. And then as we get into those higher SWE values, our model typically, well, pretty much almost always has higher SWE at those biggest SWE points here. So just scratching the surface, I think with this plot, we could easily, I think, start to show, just show me everything above 11,000 feet, or, show me everything in the Gunnison or something like that. So again, more work to do, more analysis to do. Just a summary here, not gonna go through all of this. Found the discussions in the reports, just talking about, the dust on snow and albedo and some of the uncertainties with the modeling helpful this season. And then, just going to continue plugging away at understanding, some of the biases in our model performance. So that's all I had, Taylor and Paige. So I'll take any questions if there are any.
This is Susan. I have a quick question. Do you have any of these experimental forecasts available? I mean, you're not putting them on the website or anything like that, but are they available to dig through?
We are not posting them on our webpage. We have been distributing them to the CASM group and just to stakeholders. Susan, I know Eric Sprague and Ken was looking for the Dolores experimental forecast a week or 2 ago. So I sent that along to them. But yeah, we're not, these aren't on our webpage. We're still deciding, I think, the best way to where to put these and how to communicate what these are and what they're not. And yeah.
Okay,
so
I might, if I asked specifically for like 1 or 2 of them, just kind of for my own, after season work, do you think that I could get some of these?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll connect with you guys later.
That sounds good. Yep.
And Susan, we've been actually posting these on we've been posting these on the project website as well. The main page has the latest forecasts from both WRF Hydro as well as the CBRC, the PDFs that Cody's been producing.
Oh, well, I should dig around in there. I've been distracted.
And actually, you don't even have to dig that far. Recent update, they're all on all the forecasts are on the front page. So
right, awesome.
Made it easy.
Awesome, I'll go there. Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. This is super cool. Really appreciate you guys putting in the extra effort again this year to look at these experimental forecasts and relationships. I'm really really keen, as we've talked about previously, looking at those comparisons of the SWE per polygon, and seeing what we can do there. But really great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, really exciting, Cody, to see that framework continue to develop, and thanks for presenting those results. And just a reminder to folks again that those are experimental and just kind of testing out how we can fit ASO into the CBRFC framework and continue to develop that moving forward. I think one thing to note, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's the model is not yet calibrated to this ASO data. So it's taking this kind of more accurate snowpack picture and putting it into the model that it's not yet calibrated to. So I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind as we look at these results. But it's really important to be developing this framework to get that data running into the model, just see what it looks like and how we can develop those calibrations moving forward. Does that all check out on your end, Cody?
Yep, it does.
Great. So yeah, thanks again so much for moving that work forward. It's super interesting to see and important as we collect more years of data, which we'll need to develop those calibrations. Any other thoughts or questions to add on to that? Sweet. Any other just general thoughts and questions? As Eric Sky mentioned, we'll be giving an update to the CWCB board in July, and we'll be in touch throughout the summer. We'll probably plan another stakeholder meeting later in the summer. Yeah, if possible, we'll be coming back with the funding discussion as well, but have funding on your mind. And if you're doing budgeting, we'll need to be piecing together different budgets for next year as well, as we continue to work towards a more sustainable funding source. So just have that in the back and or front of your mind as well. So any other questions or comments here today? All right.
Actually, Taylor's Ken Williams. I'll make one quick one. Just thank you to Eric and everyone else that sort of pulled together the idea for a comprehensive presentation like this. It really helped me kind of sort of assess the added value of ASO across the scale of the state, as opposed to just being hyper focused on my personal little watersheds of interest, the East and the Taylor. So I think this really helped. So you guys are to be commended for pulling this together. Thanks again.
Great to hear. Glad it was helpful. And yeah, thanks to the whole crew and Jeff for pulling that comprehensive slideshow together. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate your continued engagement here, and we will be in touch through the summer.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.